Before we get into this, I want to give special thanks to Audio 46 for providing me with this Letshuoer Cadenza review unit. If you want to help support the channel, click the links down below to purchase the Letshuoer Cadenza from Audio 46. Letshuoer is an audio company pretty much in their infancy, but you may likely have heard of them for their S12 IEM, which sprung to popularity for giving listeners a surprisingly high-quality planar driver in a $150 unit. The company has quickly and handily proved themselves in the highly affordable tier, but today I'll be asking if they can continue to pull their weight with an IEM about 15 times the price of the S12. Enter the Letshuoer Cadenza, a new flagship IEM release from the company going for $2,300. Featuring 12 drivers and a 6-way crossover system, this is a side of the company we haven't really quite seen yet. I'll be going over the Cadenza's fit, comfort, its technical design and specs, and finally get into what it sounds like. But first, let's see what you get in the box. You get a nice leather earphone case, the Letshuoer Cadenza 12 IEMs, a limited edition Cooper plate, a hard leather case with a magnetic seal, a 1.2 meter cable with a 2-pin connection and 4.4, 3.5, and 2.5 millimeter modular jacks, 3 types of ear tips in 3 sizes, vocal tips, basically treble tips, bass tips, and balance tips, and a cleaning cloth, product cards, user guide, and warranty card in this envelope that I do not intend to open. So first, let's talk about the physical design and the comfort. The Cadenza's housing is made of titanium, which, as you can imagine, gives it excellent durability. More than making it durable, it looks pretty awesome. You can see for yourself and form your own opinions, but I personally love the Cadenza's kind of sleek style and would summarize the look as futuristic, minimalist, and screw it, industrial chic. I'm also quite a fan of the cable that comes with the Cadenza, which contains 204 strands of 6N monocrystalline copper and silver in a hybrid weave construction, but to be honest, I care a little less about this and a little more about its physical build. It's very well insulated with what seems to be some sort of thick nylon material and reminds me of high-quality instrument cables you might see in a recording studio. When it comes to fit, I have entirely good things to say here. The Cadenza has quite an ergonomic shape and slipped securely and snugly into my ear canals with very little effort. The Cadenza's curves are smooth and rounded and sit without risk of poking or straining the outer ear. The acoustic nozzle doesn't have what I would call an outright deep insertion, but seems to insert just a little deeper than what I think most would consider average. The titanium build gives the IEM a certain firm feel that I was generally aware of while wearing it, and this was a quality that I just spontaneously like about it. As for ear tips, we see 3 kinds, a bass boost, treble boost, and balanced. Of note here are the bass ear tips, which are a foam silicone hybrid, not at all unlike Symbio or Symbio tips, however you pronounce that. However, I'll be basing this review off of the balanced silicone tips as it just seems like the most even-handed way to judge the Cadenza. But before we get into sound, let's get into the technical overview that we have here. The Letshuoer Cadenza sees 12 drivers, a 10mm Kevlar dome driver, or simply a specially constructed dynamic driver, Sonian mid-woofer drivers, Sonian mid-tweeter drivers, Knowles tweeter drivers, and Sonian composite super tweeter drivers. These drivers are configured with a 6-way crossover system with separate hand-cut acoustic bores that eliminate timing and phase issues. Last thing I'll mention here is that the Cadenza is very easy to drive at 16 ohms, and though it may be a bit sacrilegious to plug an IEM like this directly into your phone or laptop, it's perfectly doable. Okay, now for the good part. What does the Cadenza sound like? I'll be referring to the frequency response graph published by Letshuoer for the next few minutes, and also just mentioning again, I'm basing this off of my experience using the balanced ear tips. Let's talk soundstage first. The Cadenza has a bit of an insulated stage that stays close to the head, but seems to extend in every direction. This is the type of stage that I think of as an astronaut helmet, as despite the smaller size, it extended past my ears and was even capable of sliding parts behind my head. Parts energetically present with certain angular qualities and movements that break out of a simple left-right stereo field and succeed in producing a somewhat holographic character. So while the stage is a little small, it's very, very kinetic and energetic and entertaining. Now, let's talk balance and reference the frequency response graph provided by Letshuoer. Starting with low end, there's a surprising mid-bass punch and, less prominently but still noticeable, a sub-bass rumble. The Cadenza's boosted lows seem narrowly contained to moments of low-end impact and aren't particularly keen on jumping into a track unless they're really needed. So while they may play more of a supporting role, don't confuse this with me saying they aren't powerful. They may play things a little conservatively in general, but when they do jump into a mix, they're noticeably very powerful. Now, when it comes to high bass and low mids, this might be the least present part of the Cadenza's balance. I'll take it a step further. If warm, gooey balances are your thing, the Cadenza is not the IEM for you. In my last video review for the U4S, I mentioned that it was reserved in its high bass and low mids, but wasn't outright cold. Well, I might qualify the Letshuoer Cadenza as a bit cold. It doesn't really hug you, rather it high-fives you, and your hand stings for a little while afterwards. I'm getting a little carried away with the metaphor there, but let's finally take a look over at the frequency response. The region from 200 to 400 Hz may at first seem like it's being boosted at a quick glance, but with a closer look, we see high mids have moderately more amplitude, and most of the rest of the treble region has significantly more amplitude than this region. High bass, low mids, and center mids are left as the least amplified parts of the Cadenza's balance. And while frequency response doesn't always tell the whole story, I can verify that this is how I heard it as well. Guitars and vocals, for example, come off as very lightweight. I mean, more than that, they have an outright trebly character that emphasizes their driving overtones a lot more than it does their lower fundamentals. If you've been watching my videos, you may know at this point that I'm all for balances that place their attenuation in the high bass, low mids region. While some may miss the warmth these frequencies provide, I much prefer the low end and mid-range separation such a tuning style offers. I guess my one criticism here is that I think the Cadenza could have benefited from a little more presence in the center mids, as I wanted just a little more meat on those trebly guitars and vocals, and just a little more thump in snare drums. Now, let's finally talk about the treble, because here the Cadenza fully releases its true character and reveals its probably defining characteristic. Again, looking at the frequency response tells us a lot of the story here. We see peaks and a sustained boosted amplitude all throughout low treble and mid treble and even high treble. Despite the bold levels in low and mid treble, the Cadenza still maintains a sense of bright realism here that I didn't think led to really any awkward high-end emphasis during my listens. While electric guitars may have lacked a little bit of mid-range body, they had an abundance of really twangy, super high-definition harmonic character. I might even call this part of the treble outright smooth. And while I'm aware that my personal preferences err on more of the bright side of things, I don't think the Cadenza's low and mid treble will be particularly controversial for most listeners. But when it comes to high treble, the Cadenza isn't playing around. We see a very late treble roll-off that kind of begins around 15 kHz, but isn't really taking any heavy effect until around 18 kHz. To my ears, this makes the Cadenza a very colorful, bright, and even fiery sort of IEM, bringing air and sizzle to where you really haven't heard it before. Hi-hats and snares are sharp and sandy and even kind of granular. Vocals, already fairly untethered from their mid-range bodies, shoot into the sky with extreme amounts of air. Tight skins on tom-toms tap under drumsticks as much as you hear the low-end decay of those tom-toms. Again, in my last video review for the 64 Audio U4S, I made note that it brings in a lot of high treble into the balance, but still keeps things natural. Well, the Cadenza's upper treble is on a different level, and strongly reminded me more of The Audio's recent release, The Prestige. Now, I don't really think that the Cadenza has a realistic or natural sound to it, but I mean this as more of a neutral observation than a criticism. I for one find the Cadenza's unusually bright and sizzling qualities exciting, lifting, exposing, and further elevating the separation that's already abundant throughout the rest of its balance. While I personally like more natural tunings for over-ears, I'm usually more into colorful tunings when it comes to IEMs. That, as well as being somebody who likes a lot of brightness in their signature, puts the Cadenza pretty squarely up my alley. So my thoughts on the Cadenza in a nutshell, running down from what I started talking about from the beginning of the video. As far as fit goes and physical design, it's cool, comfortable, and well built. Sound-wise, it's zippy, energetic, and one of the brightest IEMs on the market right now. The soundstage isn't large, but it's highly kinetic and omnidirectional, sending parts to orbit all around your head, even to the back of it. Mid-range plays a kind of low-key supporting role, with more of the character being defined by sizzling, airy highs that land with a sharp and satisfying contrast against a punchy and occasionally rumbling low end. Separation is top-notch, but comes at the expense of warmth that may be missed by some listeners. So how does the Cadenza stack up in terms of value? I'd put it at pretty fair, admittedly with a desire to see it just a little closer to $2,000. What I will say is that 1. I genuinely enjoyed it. 2. It's perfectly worthy of its flagship status. And 3. It's a very, very creative IEM that seems tuned with more musicality and expression in mind than a proper realism. So while the Cadenza's intensity probably won't be for everyone, I was really into it, and I know others will be too. Very, very few IEMs are offering what Letshuoer is offering in the Cadenza right now. If you want to support the channel, you can purchase the Cadenza from Audio 46 by clicking the link in the description. If you want to see more reviews and videos like this, please feel free to like and subscribe below. Anyway, this is Chris with Major Hi-Fi, and I'll see you guys next time.